Foxes, Chapter 6. Nothing the girls laid eyes on lifted their spirits. Taco Bell, Thrifty, Discount Paint and Body, McDonald's, Pizza Hut, Vons, Bob's Big Boy, Yum Yum Donuts, garish storefronts, huge, gaudy, obtrusive signs, air thick and putrid with auto fumes, junk air, junk food, junk buildings. Madge, Jeannie, and Deidre walked along the dismal concrete flatness of Van Nuys Boulevard, worried out of their skulls. "How's Annie supposed to become your well-adjusted teenager?" Jeannie complained, curling her nostrils at the foul exhaust from the old Plymouth they were crossing behind. "I mean," she added angrily as they reached the other curb, "if she got right with her dad, she'd be really fucked." "For sure," said Deidre, hustling to keep up with the fast-striding Jeannie, a little awed by her friend's vehemence. "If she got so he thought that she was spiffy A-OK, she would have had to become a policewoman." Jeannie suddenly stopped to stare in the window of the explosion factory at the display of a half-dozen Linda Ronstadt albums. Living in the USA was blown up to 6-foot size, and the figure of Linda Ronstadt was skating on a floor of Simple Dreams and other of her albums. While they talked, the girls moved along, checking out the rest of the window. "She ought to have a place to go, you know," Jeannie said, tilting her head in front of a poster of Chaka Khan, looking voluptuous. "Where?" said Madge. She was daydreaming over the many shots of Paul in the Wing's greatest display. "Sometimes I think if you've had a fight with your mom, right, and it's 1 o'clock in the morning and there's no place to go." Jeannie was eyeballing the Steely Dan's Fagin and Becker. "Some place with pillows around and music and just some people to talk to. That sort of thing." The two other girls were nodding, staring into the window. Behind them, one door down, an LA City bus pulled up to the stop at the corner. As the door opened, a black custom fiberglass skateboard with red Kryptonic wheels dropped out onto the sidewalk. A boy's right foot, then the left, wearing blue and white Vans, were right behind it. Without ever touching the pavement, a slim, floppy-haired boy with big dark eyes launched himself off the bus and rolled towards the corner. Spotting the girls, he did a 180-degree kick turn and glided towards them. "Brad," said Deidre. The mop-headed 14-year-old in the bleached white blue jeans and Animal House t-shirt did a quick turn and kicked his board to a stop. He wore a self-satisfied, sly, innocent smile. "Where you been?" Deidre asked. "You seen Annie?" said Jeannie. "I'm working," said Brad, stomping on the kicktail of his board so that it flipped up into his hand. "Professional," he complimented himself. "You're not going to school?" Jeannie asked. "I got a job filling fire extinguishers." Jeannie raised her eyebrows as though impressed. "You seen Annie?" she asked again. "Yup," he said, looking off up the street, Mr. Cool. "Where?" "On the bus." "That bus?" Jeannie almost shouted, throwing her arms up. Brad drew back, startled. Deidre jumped up and down a couple of times, shaking her fist at the bus, already speeding far down the next block going south. "Hey, bus! Dumb bus! Dumb fucker bus!" she shouted. Passerbys turned and looked her over briefly without breaking stride. "You sure you saw her?" Madge asked. "She wanted me to hang with her, but I got to work this afternoon." "Where's she going?" said Jeannie. "Hollyweird." "You're lying," said Madge, poking Brad on the arm. "She's on probation." Brad shrugged. Leaning back against the plate glass window, Deidre said in a little girl sing-song, "That's a bozo no-no." Hollywood Boulevard. That's what her parole officer said. If you're lying, you're a low character, said Jeannie, grabbing the front of Brad's t-shirt. Brad smiled and casually lifted Jeannie's hand off his shirt and shoved off smoothly on his skateboard. He skimmed along the sidewalk for 20 feet, weaving his way between two businessmen, did a sudden bank to his left, and zipped towards the glass door of the record store. As he was about to slam into it, the electric eye took, and the door swished open. He glided through, hands in pockets, sure of his timing, trusting in technology. Madge and Jeannie looked at each other. She wouldn't, said Madge. No, said Jeannie, but then she rolled her eyes up to the smog-tainted sky. Hardly. At the same instant, both girls started for the corner at a fast clip. Jeannie grabbed Deidre, lost in contemplation of the leather vest in the window of the Soigné boutique. Come on, Jeannie yelled, and all three girls beat it around the corner and headed down the cross street. Foxes, Chapter 7. Jeannie tore up the walk, past the greasewood shrubs and the sign that said Tierra Regency Luxury Apartments, and into the apartment building. Madge and Deidre piled into the truck, a full-sized Ford pickup with shiny new black and yellow California plates. The truck's paint job was new, too, a high-gloss black, and so were the super-wide Remington X2 120 rear tires with the gleaming Astromag rims. But the truck itself, vintage, 1962. It's seen better days. Like an old Gladiator, it bore a much scarred, often repaired snout, a white-painted replacement bumper, and a shaved, patched, bull-nosed hood. Jeannie came bounding down the stairs, burst through the front door, and raced for the truck, keys jangling in her hand. She yanked open the door, bounced into the driver's seat, and fired the old Ford up. She sped along the side street, pounded impatiently on the wheel, waiting for the car ahead of her, and swung left onto Lancashire. Driving like a teamster, aggressive, arrogant, and smooth, she pushed the truck south on the boulevard, in and out of lanes. He's lying, said Deidre, trying in the swaying truck to steady her hand for the job of applying a new smoky carmine lipstick. If Annie had asked him to go with her, he'd have gone. If she asked him to fly straight up, he'd grow wings, said Jeannie. She took the right-hand bend at Universal without slowing, and just barely beat out a Camaro as she wheeled right onto Ventura. She kept it hard right and screeched around onto the entrance to the Hollywood freeway. He used to be such a sweet kid, Madge said. Used to be, said Deidre. I don't care. He's got beautiful eyes, said Madge. Really, there's something that just always reminds me of love about the guy. His mom and dad, they made him. His mom got pregnant with him right after the first Beatles concert at the Bowl. That was love. They rode in silence, heading south. The freeway followed the cut-up and over the residential hills that only a few decades ago were wild enough to be called mountains. Once over the crest, Jeannie took the Highland Hollywood Bowl exit, turned south onto Highland, and rattled down into Hollywood. Hollywood Boulevard was funk and gunk as usual. Cruising east along the 10 blocks between Highland and Vine, the three girls looked for that flash of familiar red blonde hair. Just past Musso and Frank's, they saw what looked from the rear to be the right color and cut. Up close, it turned out to be a boy with a very pretty baby face and profile and a large gold hoop earring. He turned his glinting black eyes on them and revealed that the whole right side of his face had been caved in, as if by a big fist. He twitched his head to throw a fold of blonde hair over his face and walked on. Jeannie turned and cruised back. The street fairly sizzled with raunch, a marketplace for weirdness. A pair of grandmotherly tourists, both in orange checked pantsuits, picked their way gingerly through a crowd of boy hustlers, all leather and Levi's, milling in front of the Gold Cup coffee shop, refreshing themselves for the hunt. Across the street, in front of the cave, a heavy doper's bar with an electric pink neon sign over the door, night scope lighting inside, and a bumper pool table in back for working deals, was a group of teenagers who looked like Hollywood High or Valley kids. Fancy jeans, new Adidas or Pumas or Porkies, generally healthy faces. Two would-be players, both fat, greasy white guys, one with a big Zapata mustache, the other with a headband and a ponytail, tried to capture the interest of two of the girls. The whole time the greasers talked, the girls continued to do disco wiggles to music coming from inside, and now and then they gave each other meaningful looks. Jeannie pulled the pickup over, and Deidre edged around the fat dudes into the bar. She came back out fast. No Annie. They drove on. Along the boulevard's famous black sidewalk with the inlaid rose-colored terrazzo stars and brass names of movie celebrities wandered the flotsam of the Western world, all looking for something. Exotic, omnisexual creatures craned around like lonely macaws looking for a friendly eye. Runaways from Phoenix and Seattle and Chicago skittered along the edges of prostitution. Solitary druggies and bouncing buffoonish saffron-wrapped Krishnas panhandled. Gauze turbaned consorts of Vishnu, looking tolerant and spiritually smug, chanted, a vast, harmless assortment of fly-blown street freaks looking for the 60s. As the girls waited for a light, a tall man in an exhaust gray bag suit clumped across in front of the pickup. The old man's feet were shod in tattered remains of a pair of oversized blue Adidas, so bandaged and bundled up now they looked like gigantic Frankenstein's feet. Hard on his heels came his mate, a nattering little bag lady in a blonde wig, pushing a Ralph's shopping cart filled with junk. While Deidre ran into Mr. Submarine to ask around, Jean and Madge watched a bony farm boy in engineer boots and his anorexic, blinky-eyed girlfriend clinging to each other like squid as they eased along close to the buildings in an advanced state of drug yips. Two little fat girls in Corvallis Catholic School blue and white checked uniforms sat waiting for the bus and listening to a fair-skinned boy hustler run through his price list for a potential customer. The chicken hawk, leaning out of an impeccably preserved 1958 lemon yellow Thunderbird, was a middle-aged, pleasant-looking man wearing a baseball shirt that said Coach over the pocket. As Deidre came slowly out of Mr. Submarine, looking up and down the street, a shaky black dude with a walleye and a red and blue seaman's cap approached her with a snaggly smile, both arms up. Deidre pivoted nimbly out of his embrace and moved off fast towards the truck. Asshole, fuck dog, honky cunt, shrieked the dude at her back. Twat. Deidre piled into the pickup. Let's go, you guys. I think Brad was being a piss pot. Annie wouldn't come over here. Jeannie didn't reply, just pulled the pickup back into traffic. Hey, you want to cruise with us, they say? Party down a little? Called the Chicano homeboy from the next car. A highly lacquered gold and green low-riding 1971 Chevy Monte Carlo. He held out a silver can of malt liquor. Jeannie smiled. No, man, can't today. Okay, I say, he grinned. Don't know what you're missing. The front end of the car slowly raised up a foot and a half off the ground. The shiny vehicle rumbled on down the street, nose in the air, as though in pride. There's Dragon, Jeannie said, pointing. In front of the tall, out-of-place, pink granite Bank of America building stood a classic black pimp, vanilla-colored fur Panama hat, raspberry sherbet three-piece suit, silvered shade. He was propping up one of the elegant three-story Corinthian pillars of the bank, talking to one of his white ladies. She was classic in her own right, a slim-waisted, ample-breasted strawberry blonde in Frederick's get-down finery. She wore 4-inch black strap spiked heels and a clinging, screaming red vinyl jumpsuit, zipped up just to the navel. He gives me the creeps, said Deidre, as Jeannie pulled the pickup over to the curb and parked in a bus zone. As Jeannie got out and Dragon saw her heading towards him, he cut the lady in red off sharply. Be getting along, girl, he said, and turned towards Jeannie. Folding his arms and leaning back against the pillar, the jumpsuit wandered off, casting a caustic eye on the newcomer. You're Dragon, aren't you? Said Jeannie, as bold and as cool as she could manage. She actually feared the big dude, who stood at least 2 heads taller than she and showed nothing behind the reflecting shades. He wasn't going to help her out by answering. You seen Annie? The silver shades turned and looked inscrutably down at her. Still, he didn't say a word. Annie. Annie Malik? You used to know her. Jeannie shifted from one foot to the other, keeping her face as cool as the players. After a long beat, Dragon's head turned the other way. I know any Annie Malik, he said to the air. Jeannie played his game, standing her ground and not saying a word. Finally, Dragon said, She a little thing, like you? She was, when you knew her. She kept her eyes on his half-hidden face. How you know I know her? Dragon kept his gaze fixed somewhere down the street. He readjusted his length against the bank pillar. You used to be her friend. You used to give her things. Jeannie stuck her hands in her overall pockets and kept right on staring at the man. Things. Dragon's head tilted slightly down towards the short blonde. Yeah, gifts. Jeannie stuck her chin out a little as she realized she was walking into it deeper. Did I? I did? Commenting the man slowly after a long pause. She said. Well, that's nice of me. What, for instance, did I give her? His voice was taking on an edge. I don't know. Stuff, said Jeannie offhandedly. You seen her recently? What kind of stuff? Dragon asked levelly. I just want to know if you've seen her. I just want to know what you mean I was given her in the way of gifts. Dragon snapped back, a nasty curl in his tone. He looked down at her, raised an arm slowly, and fingered the silver shades down and half-inch on his nose. Deep black eyes peered menacingly at her over the rim. Jeannie stared back in silence. Finally, the heat got too much. I don't know, she said. Sweet things like Coke and lewds and reds and Christmas trees and speckled birds. That stuff. The black eyes just bore into her silently, not wavering. What the hell, she thought. And a little blotter acid once or twice, and black mollies, and even some wild turkey, and maybe some dust. What all, nice stuff. By now, Dragon's chest was moving in and out in long pulls. His black eyes narrowed down to slits. You don't want to be here, girl, he said in a hoarse whisper. Jeannie held her ground for a minute, meeting his gaze. She turned and strode deliberately away, zigzagging through the field of freaks back to the truck. She fired it up, leaned over to check the traffic, and roared out and down the boulevard in a blast of black exhaust smoke. Her mouth was set in a rigid line. Madge and Deidre kept their eyes on her expectantly. They looked at each other, and finally Deidre said, What'd he say? He hasn't seen her, Jeannie replied shortly. All that, and he hasn't seen her? Deidre said disbelievingly. What did you talk about? Jeez. Jeannie didn't say anything. She gave Deidre half a look and tended to her driving. She swung the pickup down a side street, made the first right, and the first right again to head back towards the boulevard. God, Jeannie, I don't know how you'd even talk to the guy, said Madge, her voice rising in wonder. He could, you know, hypnotize you like a cobra or something, and the next thing you know, you're on the boulevard and you're dressed like the Pointer Sisters. I knew Annie wouldn't be here, said Deidre, shaking her hair out and fluffing it back. She's not that bananas. Anymore, said Jeannie, hoping it was true. Her mouth had a twist at the corner. Coming down to the boulevard again, the pickup came to a stop at the intersection of Highland and Hollywood. Hey, there's Mary, said Deidre. Through the truck windshield, They watched a tall beanpole of a teenage girl in a pinkish white cotton candy wig clack her way across the street in transparent plastic platforms, canary hot pants, a silver Porsche windbreaker, and slit sunglasses. She could barely walk. The platforms were so high and narrow. "Who's she?" said Madge, leaning both hands on the dash and tracking the bird-like creature across in front of them. "She's in my floral arrangement class," Deidre said. "What a weirdo," said Jeannie, wrinkling her nose. "Merry weirdo," correct Madge. "Hey," said Jeannie, "the merry weirdo." She burst into an operatic falsetto. Madge caught it immediately, flying to her own high-pitched counterpoint. The people in the next car looked over. Deidre fell out in a high squeal of laughter. Suddenly, passing across the windshield from right to left, there was Annie, blonde hair flowing, cigarette dangling from her long fingers. She dragged a terrier-like mutt along on a leash improvised from a silk scarf. With her, in his aged Levi's and black boots, was Loser, chewing on a toothpick. The girls stopped singing in mid-phrase. They looked at each other in alarm. Jeannie banged on the horn. The blast made Annie jump in fright. She looked around at the source and broke into a wide grin. "Hey, Jeannie, no shit! Hey, hey, hey!" she yelled happily. She jumped up and down, yanking at Loser's arm, waving at the truck like a loony. "Hey, my friends," she said, giving Loser's arm another jerk. "Hey, Jeannie!" "Come on, get in," said Jeannie, leaning out of the cab. "I'm walking my dog," Annie laughed, raising her cigarette hand and doing a quick comic shimmy. "On Hollywood Boulevard," Jeannie smiled at Annie's moves. "We just found it," said Annie, reaching down and scooping the scrawny little pup into her arms. "This is my new scarf." She waved the orange and yellow silk fabric. "Loser got it for me." "5-finger discount, oh yeah." Loser laughed. He flicked his filthy hair back with one hand and rolled the toothpick to the other side of his mouth with just his tongue. "Come on," said Jeannie with a wave of her hand at Annie. The light had long since changed. A slick, skinny guy with black curly hair who had been patiently waiting in his orange 280Z for Annie and Loser to move out of his way finally lost his patience. He leaned out of the window. "Hey, baby, can you move it, huh?" "You talking to me?" snarled Loser, instantly hostile. "Hey, dickhead." "No, creep. You aren't my baby." The skinny swinger flushed with anger. "Come on, Annie," Jeannie called, more urgently. "Annie!" Deidre yelled out the other side. "You don't talk to my woman like that," Loser growled, spitting his toothpick onto the street. Annie did a take. "His woman? Oh, God." She stood with her mouth open, waiting to see what Loser was going to do next. "Just move it, will you, friend?" said the hot-tempered swinger, softening his language as he sensed some real violence in the offing. "I ain't your friend, dickhead," said Loser, incapable by nature of ignoring blood once he'd sniffed it on the air. The swinger bit again. "Then you must be my asshole," he sneered at the unsavory figure, who instantly started stalking down on him. A small crowd of pedestrians let out some hoots, and car horns began honking for some movement. "Loser!" cried Annie, throwing her hands down. Unaware, she dropped the scarf. The mutt disappeared into the crowd. Loser ripped open the door of the sports car, grabbed Mr. Swinger by his black curly hair and the front of his peach-colored silk shirt and hauled him out onto the street. Off balance, the guy fell to one knee as he tried a futile left jab in self-defense. Loser helped him down, belly first, onto the pavement, hard, ripping away the guy's last bit of dignity. Loser gave him a soccer-style kick in the face as he turned to rise. Blood splurted. At last, Annie freaked. "Loser! Come on, Loser! God, I mean, stop!" Loser buried the point of his boot in the guy's gut. The victim held his bleeding mouth with one hand, struggled to push himself up with the other, and howled loudly. "My fucking face! Jesus fucking ow!" He rolled all the other way over from the blow to his stomach and got to his knees by the time Loser was on him again. He flailed uselessly from his kneeling position as Loser calmly roundhoused him once to the left side of the head, once to the right. Blood flowed juicily down the man's chest and onto the delicate peach shirt. He toppled backward onto the street, his head bonking on the pavement like a coconut. Jeannie jammed the truck up next to Annie and yelled for her to get the fuck in. Annie scooted around the front as Deidre held the door and jumped in. The truck shot forward. "Hey!" shouted Loser, looking up, to no avail. The pickup sped across the intersection, barely ahead of the cross traffic, and streaked south on Highland. Jeannie took a fast left onto Selma and headed for Cahuengo, I don't know, so she could get back north towards the freeway.